So, okay, thank you once again for being with us. This is a panel discussion about trends. So, I know some of you came prepared to do a slideshow, but I want a more relaxed conversation, you know, what you really think. This is not a formal presentation. So, to introduce you, I have on my right Roger Lim. He's from DJ Center. He's a policy officer. He's very careful about what he says because he's representing the European Union and but hopefully also himself and what he believes. Then we have Joan Crawford. I think most of you might know him. He's got a very long resume. I've met him a few years ago when he was talking about Watson, IBM Watson. He works for IBM. So he knows about big data and analytics, but he's also president of eHealth now, and he's also in HIMSS. What's your title in HIMSS?
Well, I'm an at-large board member for HIMSS.
Oh, okay. So
Microphone, sorry.
Yeah, okay.
At-large board member. Yeah.
Okay, so you'll explain what that means. Külle presented herself, and it was great hearing her. Very, very simple and to the point. Some good pointers there as to what we should be doing as a startup. I meant, you know, he had very good points. And last but not least, Joan Cornet. I'm always impressed, and every time I see him, I always say that, because I think they're doing an amazing job that I would really like to see replicated in Athens. For those of you that come to Mobile World Congress in Barcelona every February, you've probably heard or met him. Barcelona has taken advantage of this amazing event and what GSMA is doing, and they've brought together the public and the private sector, and they've created something really amazing, engaging citizens and doing a lot of stuff. They're doing educating the people about eHealth and how to use all these technologies. And it's not the only sector. eHealth is not the only sector, by the way. Mobile World Capital includes, I think it's 9 different sectors. They've got something about education, right? But I'll start with you. Tell me, can you please explain what you're exactly doing there in Barcelona?
If you can, in a few words.
So it's a lot, yeah.
No, thank you. Thank you for the presentation, and thank you for inviting me here. It's a pleasure. But basically, we had, from the beginning, 3 years ago, we started to identify where there are the challenges in digital health. And we identified 4 or 5 challenges. The first one is privacy and data protection, how we can guarantee to the patients and doctors and nurses and all the systems, the data goes where it has to go and is safe. Second one is the personal identification. That means it's me. My doctor sends to me, and he knows it's me, not my wife, not my son, or not my neighbor. No? The other one is clinical. Medicine, in the last 50 years, has changed, amazing change. Honestly, the people with some age like me, I mean, it's totally different the way medicine is practiced nowadays. And the change is because it's medicine based in evidence. The doctor, the nurse, the pharmacist, they don't react to our illnesses because they think perhaps that could be good. They know that is good. It's working or it's working, but anyway, it's based on science. That means technology, if it has no evidence, is difficult to make through the system. That means it's one big barrier, how we can have evidence, at least it's not damaging the patient, for example, and what it's doing is correct. The other one is business model, who pays? Because at the end of the day, it's not the app. The applications are only the tip of the iceberg. If it's a new service that Dr. Crawford has in a hospital, a cardio service online, it's not the app. It's the wearables, it's the data guy going to the hospital, who looks the data, who calls the patient. That means it's very complex. And the last one is one we just now, we're working 6 months ago or 8 months ago, is about ignorance. We believe that most of the people working in the healthcare system don't understand what means digital. Okay, they understand because they're clever people working with iPads, with iPhones or whatever, and computers, but they don't have the sense how digital can help, not the administration, to help the treatment, the diagnostics, the follow-up, the monitoring. That's why we're creating in a few months Digital Health Academy. We want to create a platform where the knowledge goes through the platform and goes to people they want to know, from GPs to nurses to all people working in the healthcare system. And I don't want to move longer. That means in each challenge we have been working in different, only one example, we work in that BGSMA. That's a very important thing, is a system to identify the person. And the name is Mobile Connect. It's a big change in technology. Is when we used Facebook, for example, the password goes, I don't know where, no? But the password is going, I don't know. Somebody can take my password, my password, sorry. Password too. Anyway, and the system is, the password is into your SIM card. That means never goes outside the SIM card. Anyway, that makes it simple. But anyway, I close here because it's too long. But anyway, to say we are working on that with partners in Spain, Catalonia, and partners outside Spain, trying to have learning together, because at the end of the day, honestly, we are learning, all of us. Thank you.
So, John, what do you do?
What do I do? Well, I hope that I'm a strong advocate for the adoption of digital health in many different guises. And I've been involved in this area for about 15 years, and I've seen the development of digital health from the early days of electronic patient records through to use of telemedicine, and now into the world of apps and wearables. And I think what's important to consider is that this is really about digital disruption, and digital disruption has already happened in many other industries. What do I mean by digital disruption? It's the convergence of the concept of cloud computing, mobile platforms, analytics, and now also Internet of Things. If you put these together, you've got four tremendous forces that are going to cause not just medicine, but the general care systems that we have to change the way that they operate. If you think of mobile, for example, I mean, the mobile platforms are now pervasive. Many of us have effectively what we would once have thought of as supercomputers in our pockets in the form of a smartphone. They are context sensitive, they're location sensitive, they're always on. So you've got a fantastic platform for innovation there. If you think of cloud computing, it's low cost, flexible, and democratizing. It allows people with big ideas to get started and then to scale them up to make them really global in scope. If you think of analytics and what we can do now to understand people's preferences and what causes people to buy or to change, think of services such as Amazon or Netflix and the kind of analytics they're using now to kind of attract our attention and to get us to come back again and again. And finally, Internet of Things, the idea that we can have not only sensors in the environment and in our homes and our cars, but also we can start to wear these devices. And I think what's really interesting there, I was at a conference last week in Boston, the Partners Connected Health Conference, which this is the 13th time they've run it. And 13 years ago, when I went to the first one, it was mostly about doctors using telemedicine to connect with patients remotely to do diagnosis. This year, it was very much about what can you wear, what can you have in your pocket to allow you to understand what keeps you well. A lot of focus on not just healthy living through activity and diet, but also mindfulness and stress management, and effectively even getting into one of the most remarkable things I saw was clothes that light up based on your mood, right? So the concept of being able to display how you feel to other people so they know whether to avoid you or to come and talk to you. This whole thing is moving at a tremendously fast pace in other industries. In healthcare, it's a little bit slower because, well, for all the reasons, I guess, in the room that we know, adoption is slow because the medical profession is more conservative for very good reasons. It does take time to change a system that's been in place for over 100 years in most countries in terms of the way the healthcare system is managed and paid for. But what's interesting to me is the way that individuals can now decide to use technology themselves to get information, to understand what things they might actively do to maintain wellness, and to start to get that feedback. And I think where it becomes really interesting is when you start to be able to combine what we're collecting about ourselves with what the medical system already has in its digital databases. Once you start to blend these two things together, I think we're getting to a point now where we can start to make the interactions with the medical system more effective. We can give them more insight into how we're living and why we may be having issues dealing with particular physical or mental issues. And we can start to really get to the point where things become much more personalized, that things are kind of aimed at us in a more subtle way. From the presentation we had about, for example, behavior change, I think there are some quite well understood models now about what causes us to want to change. Things like, for example, the trans-theoretical model of behavior change, where you go through these 5 stages of change, pre-contemplation, you haven't even started thinking about it, contemplation, action, and then into preparation, action, then into maintenance. And I think digital technologies can help us all to move through these stages of behavior change if they're well designed and if they're personalized and if they are taking into account what our goals are. So I think it's a really exciting time to be involved in this industry. And I can really, having been in it for 15 years, I can sense a real change now. In the last couple of years in particular, I can really sense that people are beginning to understand the potential of what we can do with this technology. Not just individual citizens, but doctors and health systems managers, policymakers, politicians. And I think this is a good time to just push on this now, because we have all the things that we need. We don't have to invent anything new to make this happen. We have all the technology we could possibly need to do this. We just have to make it happen by pushing and demanding convenience, quality, self-sufficiency. I think these are the things that will make a difference.
Okay. Roger, what do you do?
What do I do? Yeah, it's working. First of all, thank you very much for having me here in this panel discussion. I think, as John already said, it's a very interesting times now when it comes to eHealth. Also, the presentation that we had just before this panel discussion by Külle, I think it's a very good presentation because it really sums up the challenges that we are facing in Europe and where we need to put our focus on. The European Commission or European Union is very much aware of these challenges, but at the same time also faces a lot of challenges. We see eHealth as a way to tackle a lot of these challenges. For instance, the increasing rise of healthcare costs. Member states are dealing with a lot of questions on how to deal with that, but also how to mobilize people who are, a society that's getting older, the silver economy, how to make them part of, the working society still. Last year, for instance, what for us is important, eHealth now has becoming to be a topic that's being picked up a lot, by not only by member states, but also within the European Commission, especially last year when President Juncker has announced the Commission strategy when it comes to digital, the publication of the digital single market strategy in May last year. I think this is a good example on the importance now, as we see in digital, how we should move digital forward. This strategy is focusing on tackling a lot of barriers because, it is good to hear all these success stories in member states itself, but when you look at Europe and the growth potentials for all these startups, etc., Europe is still a very difficult market because it is a market with 28 differences, 28 markets, different standards being used, etc. Also legislative differences between member states. So at some times it can be mind-boggling for especially startups. And what we are trying to do is to bring down those barriers because we believe, a lot of these barriers are unnecessary. So we need to figure out where do we need to put focus on taking away, especially legal barriers, but also interoperability. We acknowledge the various uses of standards in Europe, but when you develop something, take in mind that it needs to also talk with other solutions in other member states, not only in your member state, in your country, but also with others. That's what we are trying to achieve, a digital single market. We believe that, if we take down those barriers, it creates a better competitive advantage or a competitive strength of the European Union, especially when you look at other countries around us, for instance the United States, India, or other emerging markets. They're moving forward quite fast. We cannot stay behind. A lot of eHealth itself in the digital single market strategy has been placed under the topic of interoperability and standardization. We think there's a lot to win on that. The European Commission is working closely together with the member states to increase interoperability. We have an eHealth network. DG Santé, the European Commission, is responsible for this eHealth network, and we're very happy to have it, to have all these 28 member states work together in order to improve interoperability. At the moment, for instance, we are building a digital service infrastructure, and what that is that it's actually an infrastructure that allows health data to travel across borders, with a specific focus now on e-prescriptions and patient summaries. If you look at when we talk about awareness of member states or of the use or the need for eHealth, I think it's picking up now. When it comes to the implementation of this digital service infrastructure, you see that all the member states have expressed interest, all the member states, and we are hoping that around, at 2020, we are able to bring down those barriers and to be able to not only exchange data, but also use this data for specific reasons within healthcare. As you said as well, big data, for us as well, it's a new terrain, but data already exists for a long time. We are figuring out on how to bring big data further in eHealth for analytics. I'm not going to talk any longer. I mean, we'll be discussing that later on.
You did mention, Joan, behavioural change, and I think it is an issue that, Juan, you're trying to tackle and educate the people. But in my mind, I also see that there is new developments and new hope to solve problems that we never even dealt with. For example, I know ECH Alliance had a case with Ireland where, our parents, we go and to take our medicine and then they don't take it. And before we never ever wondered what happens or how much that costs a country, a state, or a hospital. So suddenly there's the hope that this can be solved. And new things that we never thought about, because exactly data and analytics are opening up topics that existed always, but suddenly there's hope. So for me, it's multifaceted. There's, educating the people how to use it, because we need, data comes from us, the users. But then, I too believe the medical staff, the clinicians are picking up because they're seeing the value that is being created. But it's very hard, and I'm not sure if we will be able to tackle it altogether. So Juan, your feedback.
Listen, again, I think back to the presentation was excellent, was very good, because it was very few slides by very clear messages. And in real, before in the plenary room was IBM about the slide. I took a picture because it's 5% is genetics, 20% is the healthcare system, 75% depends on you and your environment. No? That means it's real. And that means it brings the following. Important. When we start to talk about eHealth 25 years ago, John, 25 years, probably, no? eHealth started to...
Yes, about that, yes.
Was a computer system, was a computer problem. And was informatics, they tried to each other, to help each other, because the bosses in the hospital asking them strange things, no? But was based on computers. And that is something still there, no? The change in these 25 years or more is now, the change is the following. Human beings, we not only want to be, not to be sick, we want to be healthy. Despite the fact it's not easy, because they're not good. But at the end of the day, we want to live more years, to be beautiful always, handsome, and we want to be, no? And not saying not eternity, but in a sense, saying, okay, why not we try to get, and now there are pills about intelligence, pills about memory, good or wrong, I don't know, I don't have any proof of that. But anyway, humans, we want more. And that is important thing, the following. The difference between 25 years and now is that time where computers, now is algorithms. And our body is an algorithm. At this moment, my body is doing a lot of things I don't know, but it's working. My heart, my nerves, my stomach, everything is working. And it's data, I don't know, but something happens, no? And that is the way things will go now onwards. It's no more computers, but it's a tool, and it's all tablets, a company. The thing is, humans, we want to be healthy, and our algorithm will be very important for our health. And as John said before, the trends in Boston last week, no? Is more and more things telling me what is happening in me. And that is a big change, and that happens outside the hospital, outside the healthcare system. It happens in my home, in my workplace, and company. That's a big change. That means there's the mindset. We are not anymore talking about computers. We are talking about health. And we're talking about the way algorithms can help to be healthier, and when you are not good, to control our illnesses. That's the big change, the big picture. If not, we are lost in translation, no? So many little things, little projects, okay, but that's the big picture. Another thing, to finish that too, is I totally agree with John too, and Roger, about the big data and IoT. That is happening fast and faster. Because it's nonsense. A patient in South Korea, or in Sydney, or in Barcelona, or in Athens, having diabetes. And it's the same diabetes. Different people, the same diabetes. Why we don't have this data to know how it's working in one place? And this is what Watson is doing at this moment, no? That's the future. That means that is important. That's a trend. That means the trends is, one is IoT, big data. Another one is, for me, the fact patients will be more demanding. That means the patients, the name patient, the patients, no? It's gone. It's gone. People are fed up. I don't want to wait a month to get a doctor, no? Or to go analytics, or to go to image, no? I want now, because I am a citizen, I have my rights. And that will be more and more pressure. The same for companies. That means people are very intelligent. They don't want fake things. Things have to work. I don't want to something is only seems work, has to work. The other thing is about the remote monitoring. That will become fast. That means for startups, they have to, that is one area where a lot of things can happen, because remote monitoring will be more sophisticated. What see today, as John said before, no? Could be clothes, could be machines, could be things, but it's happening. And finally, the question is, the health providers have to change the way they're working. People, they want data. That means the idea my medical record is in a hospital, is in a doctor's house or whatever, that is gone. People don't accept it's my data. How in hell? I can head here at this moment, I can go to my bank account, very poor anyway, but bank account. I can know what is happening. I know that in real time. I can change my accounts to make things happen. And I can go to, can change my plight. I can get a book, I can have a film, I can have a music, and know my health. That is totally stupid. Why not my health can be accessible in my tablet or my phone? That is the trend, I think, important for the startups in order to work in the areas where more future, in our view, is happening. Thank you.
Yes, I just wanted to add one more trend that I don't know if I've heard. That up to now, mostly the healthcare had to take care that we don't die, that we still stay alive and take care of our disease. But it's more and more that the people with disabilities, with diabetes, with dementia, seniors, they want to enjoy their life. And there are more and more products and services that make the life of very different people enjoyable and fun, not regarding what disease they have.
So I'll ask you this. So, okay, I understand behavioral change. We have to change things. And there's different trends. You've mentioned most of them. That's one of the reasons I didn't ask the typical question, because you've already talked a lot about that. What if you had to advise the state as to how to come to this behavioral change? How's it going to happen? Is it going to be bottom up? Is it going to be advertisement? Is it going to be better marketing for all the sectors? What's missing? Why aren't people trusting this? And I will want to get into the question privacy and data, because it's a very thin line. I want to give my data, but where is it going? So first, please tell me, if you were to advise your Prime Minister or the Minister of Health, what would the actions be tomorrow? And let's put it hands-on. What would you do?
May I?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. I think I'm a psychologist. I'm not a doctor. I'm a psychologist, clinical psychologist. Anyway, one of the things is when you go to the supermarket, no, usually at the end when you go to the cash register to pay, is all the sweeties they're there, no, sweeties, all things, but for the health. When you go to a canteen in a school or a canteen in a company, depends on the size of the plates. No, the bigger the plate, the bigger you eat. No? That means a lot of things are not about all. For example, now in UK, the debate about to have tax on sugar. No, the sugar in the drinks or company. That is the way, probably. The other thing is the limit of the freedom and how you as a doctor, you can push your patient. No? It's a very complex thing, no? Because I know you have to do it, I don't do it. And that is difficult. That, and I said before very well, it's not about imposing things, it's about motivating and making. And one thing, studies made by psychologists, sociologists, when a family member is, for example, eats a lot of sugar or smoking a lot, everybody does the same. That means to have a father smoking at home is a way to smoke everybody. And somebody who's eating a lot of sweets and company is the same, no? I mean, in a way, the behavior is very complex. But there's a lot of things, a lot to know about that. Sometime I wrote an article some month ago saying we know technology, but we don't know the humans, no? And the humans are very complex, no? Because I said before very well, is people know the drinking is bad for me, but I'm still drinking. No, eating too much is bad for me. I'm doing that. But to make a positive message and to finish to answer is the thing is our job is to provide the clinical professionals, doctors, nurses, pharmacists, and company, the tools to help the patient. And it's different for me as a doctor to go to the kid, teenager, too obese or etc., saying, oh, you have to do something. But to say, okay, it's an application to that, you can do that, no? That means they need tools to that. Mm-hmm. I think that's the way. But it's still a long way because we don't know humans.
Mm-hmm. Can I pick up some of those points and maybe add a couple of other ones? So, behavioral psychology research suggests that we really don't respond to orders to do things. If you're told you have to eat 5 vegetables a day and you mustn't have more than 21 units of alcohol a week, I mean, it simply is not effective. People just don't respond to these mandates. Similarly, if you just provide people with huge amounts of information about the benefits of a healthy lifestyle and so on, it's not useful. I mean, we have access to so much knowledge now on the internet that we don't act on. So I think we have to kind of think very carefully about what is it that people really need, to support them. Now, if you're interested in maintaining fitness and want to be athletic, then of course you will invest in lots of devices and wearables and apps to maintain that kind of peak performance. If you're like most of us, though, you're not a fitness fanatic, but you also don't want to get, to start to get sick too early in your life. You want to maintain that wellness. Then you might well decide to try using one of these, like a fitness tracker, just counting steps. It's been shown that after about 6 months of using one of these, people tend to discard them because they've learned enough in that 6 months to know how many steps they do, and therefore, it's achieved its objective of doing that. I've been involved recently in a clinical trial looking at stress management, and one of the devices we've been wearing is a thing called the Spire. You wear it on your belt. I don't have it with me today, and it measures respiration. And what does it do with that? Well, it takes your respiration rate and it turns it into one of 3 states. You're either focused or calm or tense, one of these 3 states, depending on what your breath is doing. And the interesting thing about this kind of technology is that you can look back at your day and you can look at the points at which you were stressed and tense and try and work out, well, what was going on at that moment in the day that caused me to feel like this. We had the interim results from this clinical trial last week in Boston, and one of the interesting things was that the people that were wearing these devices became much more aware of what caused them to get stressed, and their calm and their focused moments went significantly up by about 100%. So it shows just a little bit of biofeedback about, understanding how your body's reacting to these stresses, gives you enough knowledge, enough information to then start, adapting and acting on that. You can take it even further into areas like mindfulness, and I'm going to be talking a bit about this later this evening. You can now wear devices that help you to meditate. There's a thing called the Muse. It's a very simple EEG. You stick it on your head like a pair of sunglasses, and it basically turns your brain activity into a soundscape. You wear earbuds and you have an iPhone with it. And the idea really is to help you to improve your meditation technique by giving you immediate feedback about how distracted you are. The more distracted you are, the noisier things get in your ears. And the better you're meditating, the quieter and calmer it gets. And at the end of the session, you get a complete readout of where you've been. How long were you distracted for? How many times did you get distracted? How often were you in the zone? And this is very interesting because there's more and more evidence in the scientific literature that stress management and using mindfulness has not only a big effect on mood and productivity, but also in physical health. There's a very strong connection between these two things. So I think this is rather interesting, the way that this is going. So if you to answer your question, what do you advise your health minister to do? Don't build more hospitals, because that's really not all that helpful. Don't tell people to eat 5 vegetables a day. Find ways of engaging people. This is again a fundamental thing that's changing. Healthcare is full of what I would call systems of record. Think of the early electronic patient record systems and the PACS and RIS systems, the lab systems. What are they? They're basically places where we record something that's happened. It might be a measurement we took with a patient, a medical image, it might be an admission, and so on. Mixed in with that, we've got a few other things that to do with planning, like for planning therapy and so on. What we're missing and what needs to change is we need to move from just simple systems of record to systems of engagement. So we need technology that basically allows the doctor and the patient, or the patient and the nurse, or the citizen and their social worker, allows them to have a productive relationship with each other, augmented by digital services. This is what we need. We can build on what we've got. We've got huge amounts of data to work with. We can build on that, but we have to start designing these systems that basically go beyond just pure record keeping, and to start to turn what we know about individuals into something that they can act on. This is the key message that I'd put across to health ministers. So let's have fewer hospitals, let's have fewer commands on how to live our lives, but let's have the ability for all of us to understand what keeps us well and to have that discussion with our care providers.
Roger?
I think if I would speak to the Minister of Health of the Netherlands, I would actually advise her to invest more in startups, in e-health solution developers, because I think we all agree. I don't really believe in a top-down approach where we need to inform people about the benefits of e-health, etc., etc. I think nowadays a lot of people are already aware of the benefits of e-health and how it can be used. But I think if we need to invest more in startups, in e-health developers, and also have because I think the not necessarily the responsibility, but I think the success of e-health lies in the user friendliness of solutions. I think it was already said in the presentation as well. I think that is very important, people, and also on the practical use of it, because people need to be convinced that it really does something for them and it's very easy to use. If I can give an example, for instance, years ago, I think it was in 2006, I was still an intern. I was working for the Dutch telecommunications company. And back there, I was working in a division on mobile data. And this unit was there to convince people of the use of mobile data. And, they had the first BlackBerries, and we had to explain push emails and what it does, and it's beneficial for you, etc., etc., you should use it. And still people didn't get it until an innovative solution came to the market for the first generation iPhone. And everyone starts to understand, because it was a very practical application. It was very easy to use, and people actually see, oh yes, you know, now I can see, I can open an application, I can go to Facebook normally, you know, because in the beginning people would think, why would I have a smartphone? I can go on my computer or my laptop and I can go into Facebook. But now I can have it now on my mobile device, you know. So if eHealth really, the success of eHealth also depends on whether we involve the end user of eHealth solutions in the whole process of development. You know, a lot of times, you know, there's a lot of solutions in the market, but it forgets the user friendliness or the, you know, the target group for which it is intended to.
UX. So you're talking about user experience.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So I don't want to keep this boring. Are there questions from the audience? There's something you would like to ask?
Here we are.
Is there any way we can give a microphone? Yes. Here to the gentleman over here, please.
Thank you very much.
I think it's better we take some questions now, because we can keep the same thing, and you've talked data, and so there'll be more of those kind.
Hi, how are you? My name's Gareth Presh. I'm originally from Dublin. I'm the founder of the World Health Innovation Summit. The answer is in the community, and there is examples of best practice there. So we have the likes of Dr. Amir Hannan in Manchester, who's given records access. And if you look at the platform that we've just established, which is run through social media, and we engage on that and we scaled it up. So I've been this week in the community in Kariez in Greece, and we've had that in... we now have like 20 different locations around the world, and we plan to roll these events out. It's the first step. So you engage in the community, you share knowledge to improve healthcare, and it's a platform for patients, clinicians, managers, voluntary sector, education, and the business community, because it's not just it's not just patients and clinicians here. Health is everything. It's everything that we do, and we heard downstairs about 99.9% of people are treated outside the system. So that's where the real gains are going to come. And the community will actually drive this because the need is there. And as you say, technology on your smartphone, you can do it instantly. I'll talk a little bit more about some of the initiatives that have come from our events that are actually driven from the community. So people are going to demand that data.
Yeah, but they have to be engaged in the community. So do we have any other question? Okay, the gentleman behind, the first gentleman. Thank you.
Hello, Nikos Naum from Blue Line. Startup
It's one of our startups that presented earlier.
Just presented. It's actually an Uber for doctors. We developed the app, and we called it Uber for doctors. So my question is actually about the regulations of EU. Based on my knowledge that teleconsultation services are not permitted. What do I mean? That doctors cannot prescribe if they haven't seen the patient in person. It is permitted in the US and also in the UK. So it is in the EU agenda to allow teleconsultation services.
Teleconference from a distance. He's asking, and do diagnosis from. You're talking about diagnosis from a distance.
Telemedicine. So telemedicine, yes. I think it's a very good question, and for us there are many questions that we have ourselves when it comes to telemedicine as well. There are, for instance, also liability. You know, which regulation or which legislation apply. You know, if you're a patient, for instance, in France and have a telemedicine conference with someone in Greece, and something happens to the patient, which liability regulation applies? All these rules, you know. As I said, you know, we are aware that these eHealth solutions, telemedicine solutions, in the context of cross-border healthcare creates an extra dimension of challenges and questions. And it is something that we are investigating at the moment. We are launching a very large study on telemedicine to get an idea of which challenges do we face. First of all, we want to know what is already there when it comes to telemedicine, because there's a lot already going on in Europe and in the world. And what are the barriers? You know, there are a lot of legislative barriers, as you said as well just now. Legal barriers. Are these justified legal barriers? Do we need to do something? So we are investigating through this big study, and we are trying to come up with follow-up actions on how to deal with it. It might mean that we need to tackle some challenges in the regulation at the moment, in legislation. Yes, good question, and we are aware of these
Joan,
differences.
I think you have a experience from
We need a
this.
unified health also.
Say again?
We need a unified health also, not only economy, not only market.
Unified health. I think it's from a European perspective, it's very difficult to say unified health, because then we have 28 member states on our back saying you cannot touch our health systems. I think it's not necessarily unified health, it's more clarity on what are your rights, and if you go somewhere, which law applies to you, and what are your rights to when it comes to receiving healthcare in another member state. And we have that. I mean, we have the cross-border healthcare directive at the moment that provides clear rules and rights of patients going to another member state. The question is, this cross-border healthcare directive, for us a question as well, does it also tackle, for instance, telemedicine? Because it is cross-border healthcare, but you're not literally physically going to another country. You are still in your own country, but you have sort of like an internet connection with another country. So that, as I said, different dimension of challenges. But
I have a question. I don't know, Nico, if this applies. What happens within the country? So let's say it's a Greek doctor with me as a Greek patient. Can he, I don't know what applies in Greece, but in general, in other countries, is it something that is permitted? Can he diagnose me from a distance?
I don't think it's forbidden in most countries.
Yeah, we were talking about cross-border, but let's say within the country, I find a doctor in another city, so it is permitted and something happening, right?
It depends on the legislation of the country itself. Some country allows it, a lot of countries allow it, within the country, because it is a form of providing healthcare. Yes, it is allowed, absolutely. But it is still, even member states itself are sort of like investigating or sort of, getting acquainted with the telemedicine world.
We need to move on from the idea that you need to have a face-to-face relationship all the time with a patient. A lot of the issues have actually come down to reimbursement. Doctors often don't get paid unless they have a physical appointment. So if you can eliminate the kind of the reimbursement side of it, what can we do with this remote contact? Well, we've already got very well-established networks for medical image reading, basically looking at an image remotely that's been taken either for a first reading or for a second opinion. We've now got telestroke services where the doctor in a remote location diagnoses whether someone's had an ischemic stroke or not, so they can decide on the appropriate treatment regime, because they've only got a few hours to make that decision. We've also got teledermatology services now becoming quite significant, where you can basically send just an image of a lesion on the skin and have that remotely diagnosed. These things are all entirely possible and should be encouraged. We can go further and get into Skype-like conversations with doctors, and there is an organisation in called Babylon in the UK, which offers exactly this kind of service. It's basically an instantaneous on your smartphone, I need to talk to a cardiologist right now kind of thing. You have to give them your credit card details, but the rest is fairly simple. I just want to point out a good friend of mine, Dr. Amit Bakai, he's a cardiologist in London. He pointed me at something I hadn't noticed before, which was a brand new hospital that cost $500 million to set up in the United States. It's in Missouri. It's called Mercy Virtual Hospital. It has no beds and no patients within the walls, nothing like that. I have a photograph of it I'll use later, and it basically looks like an office with people walking around with just regular clothes on and no sign of a stethoscope. And yet there are 330 clinicians working in this building, and they're providing services such as remote patient monitoring, remote ICU monitoring for other hospitals, so they can monitor people in the ICU ward, so you don't need to have a whole team of nurses doing that day and night. You can get telestroke services, you can get various on-demand, telephone triage and so forth. This is the future. This is the way it's going to go. We have to allow this to happen because the alternative of having to keep traveling to see people time after time is so wasteful of human resource on both sides, both the doctor and the patient having to travel. So I think if we come back in 10 years' time to this meeting, we'll wonder why this was even an issue, because it just has to happen. It's just so obvious to me.
Külle in Estonia, it's eStonia. So how's telemedicine going there? You probably have a lot of remote places which, because of the snow, might need doctor assistance, or not? Or am I imagining Iceland?
Also by territory very small, so we don't have too many very remote places except islands. So some of the remote care is used, but not still too widely. And I guess quite a lot because of the habits, because people are kind of used to go to the local doctor instead of using the digital things. But of course, it's growing. Mm-hmm.
Any other question from the audience? Lady, can she have a microphone? And then...
Hi, I'm Christina Vescos from Philips Healthcare. I have a difficult question for you, but I hope we can maybe debate about it. I think nowadays it's acknowledged that it has to be a partnership of many different stakeholders. So you need to have the full ecosystems of providers, industry, patients, community, third sector. But from your real experience, who do you think should be on the driving seat? Who should really lead this transformation from all the stakeholders?
Who wants to take that? No, they're baffled.
I don't think there's a single owner. It's Christina, isn't it? I don't think there's a single owner for this. I mean, who designs our healthcare system? Who designed the one we've got? It didn't really get designed. It just kind of grew over time and evolved into what it is today. And it's regulated by the way we pay people, the way that we have job definitions, the way that we choose to build hospitals in certain places. It's just evolved over time, and we haven't really given much thought to how to design the new system. And I don't think you can really do it top down. I don't think you can, you can have policy decisions that kind of push people away from acute care into community and home care. You can have policy decisions that reimburse you for keeping people well rather than just treating them when they're sick. There's a range of things that you can do at that level, but I think in the end, I'm a great believer that the real innovation comes from the ground up, from people with great ideas working in a particular setting, and their ideas get noticed, and then they get scaled up, and they become just the norm over time. And I think that takes a bit longer in healthcare than it does in other industries, but it will happen. The pressures are just so obvious within the system. So I think it would be great to think we could kind of sit back and say, okay, let's just redesign this whole thing in the way that it works. But what I see happening is some really nice projects where primary care organizations, for example, are saying, actually, we could do a lot more than we do today to keep people out of hospital. We could do an awful lot more by way of minor surgery and just basic diagnostics. We could do all that kind of thing. And immediately you're starting to kind of pull the power away from the acute sector into primary care where it's less expensive to deal with it. There are other projects where you're starting to see a collaboration, often a willing collaboration of volunteers between the primary care sector, the social care sector, the voluntary sector, to try and deliver a more integrated, joined-up set of services. And that's great, because we need more of this kind of thing. And I think, the care systems will evolve like that. I don't think they're going to be redesigned, unless you're very lucky and have a country that doesn't have a care system today, and you can start from the beginning, and maybe there's a few developing countries that are kind of in that position.
Might be Wollabot from Belgium. The area of the Wollabot. What's it called? The area from Belgium that they decided 3 million people not to vote for SEDA?
Balloon.
Yeah, okay. So they'll make a new country. So Juan, you wanted to...
See, I fully agree with Joan. So only to add the following. I think the experience shows that it's needed leadership. I mean, somebody, depends on the level, somebody who says, I want to do it, I want to lead that. That's one thing. Second thing is the outside the hospital. For example, one project we start just now is about big data. And we had a long debate in Catalonia last year or so, 2 years ago, was a failure because it was a big project about big data, health and company. And finally, for political reasons, was not possible. And now we're launching a different thing. Nowadays, we have people who are blood donors, organ donors. Why not data donors? No? Exactly. That means I have an illness, whatever. I'm a woman, I have breast cancer, or I have a problem with my stomach, whatever. That's my data. I authorize to be in the, no? By the way, that is the way, no? But the same. That happens if somebody has a leadership. It's not happening because one day, like mushrooms in the forest, no? It needs people believing on that and fighting for it.
Yeah, I wanted to add that in one of the advices also to the public sector that we are trying in Estonia. It doesn't work? No. Oh. Okay. That works better. For the public sector is that let's say, to try to convince them that the ministry people or the health insurance people don't need to create all the digital health and telemedicine and health services by themselves and then make a tender so that the cheapest offerer does the minimum, what he has to do. And at the same time, the startups are sitting alone and don't know what the need is. They don't have access to the doctors and healthcare, so they don't know what really the need is and how to implement it. So the role of the state is mostly to open up and tell the startups and tell the tech developers what are the needs, what are the obstacles, how the system works now, and be kind of in good relations with the private sector so that the private sector can do and can have access to the real problems, and then the good solutions would come.
It's true, I agree. Yeah, I find interesting the project NASA did when they decided to open up all the intellectual property, and we actually have a speech tonight at the Technopolis where they're showing how they're using satellites for telemedicine, and it's a big organization that actually made this available, and so it's forming how things should go. Grigori, I think you had a question. Can you get a microphone there? Probably will be one of our last ones.
Thank you. Greg Roumeliotis, healthmanagement.org. Getting back to the points excellently mentioned by all the panel, it's about leadership, but about leadership of all of us. It's about people and technology. Technology drives, but it's us human people, all the ecosystem that we lead. Otherwise, there would be no conference today, not us matchmaking, meeting each other. Yes, we are in the revolution within the digital health era. Yes, we talk about and we develop artificial intelligence models. Yes, it's about efficiency and efficacy at the end of the day. But don't forget that health is the perfect and elastic good. And always people should be incorporated and accounted for. Because we see those of us who have this little luxury professionally flying around the world. We see our US friends that are a bit, of course they are leading, and with great pleasure we see the best practices, we adopt them, we evolve them in Europe, but it's all about people. I think at the end, my initial question was fully covered. Just to highlight this, it's all about us at the end. Thank you.
I think everybody agrees, but we'll close this. It's a little bit different question. I want you, honestly, to tell me one thing, one trend that you have seen, and you thought, oh my God, this is amazing. And I'm going to start with Külle, because she said today she hasn't heard anything new from our startups. But I want you to tell me something new that really astonished you the past year, and then you thought, wow, this is innovative, this is a breakthrough, this is going to change things. Disruptive, a word that's been used very often. But is there something, I want all four of you to tell me something like human beings, that you saw something, you say, this is it. It might be wrong, it might not turn out, but I want to hear it from you.
Difficult question, but of course there are some. I think when bring out one thing is then I think virtual reality is something that's going to change also quite a lot in healthcare things when applied in a good way. Seen some good cases in that.
John?
I'd like to draw your attention to something which I think is really interesting as a social innovation, and it's to do with independent living as we get older. As we get older, hopefully many of us will not be crouched over with a stick like you showed on the photograph, and we will be living a healthy, old age. But many of us will have special needs. We won't be so mobile. We will maybe have cognitive impairment. We'll maybe be living on our own after our partner dies and so on. So what can we do about that? Well, one of the most amazing things I saw is the idea that we can repurpose our postal workers to act as informal not carers, but people that just keep an eye on how you're doing. I mean, the postal services are finding the revenue is going down and down because there's less and less mail. So what can they do? They can go to your door and ring the bell and deliver a conversation. And as they're talking to you, they can say, are you feeling okay? Do you have enough medication in the house? Do you have enough to eat? Can I order anything? Do you want me to set up an appointment with anybody for you? And as they're doing this, they can assess the person and think, well, this person looks kind of depressed, or they haven't dressed yet and it's already 2 in the afternoon, or they look a little bit confused. And as they're doing this, this then becomes another essential piece of information that they can take back and then offer to the care system to act on. And that care system could just be a neighbor, could be a family member, or it could be someone who's got a professional capacity to look after them. This is happening already in the island of Jersey, just to the south of England. It's called Call and Check. If you come to my presentation later, I'll tell you a bit more about it. It's a call and check service, and it's now been picked up by the Commonwealth Fund, which is a big think tank in the US, a healthcare think tank, as one of the top 3 innovations it's seen in trying to maintain independent living. So I think we have to kind of just think again about how can we take people who already are doing these jobs, and maybe maybe they've got time on their hands, maybe their revenue needs to be propped up, and let's repurpose them and get them involved in the care system.
And it's supposed to be, it's a dying profession because we don't send, it's really smart, I'm impressed.
Yeah.
So Roger.
When you asked that question, I had to really think about what really, makes me think, wow, that's very interesting. And we've been talking a lot about data, and quite recently I got in touch with a new thing that was new for me, that was in silico clinical trials. I mean, for me, that was absolutely wow, because it shows how important data is. So what is in silico trials? It means that you use data, and with this data, you kind of model a human person, as a sort of like a computer model of a human person, and you use that model to test pharmaceutical products, medicines, on a computer model. And you get very quick and very reliable results out of this kind of trials. So it does not replace in vitro or in vivo trials, clinical trials, but it is I think a very interesting addition to the possibilities of data in this sense, and that really brought me into a very new world for me.
It sounds
as well, yeah.
So, Juan.
It's difficult, but anyway, one thing real, because it has no fantasy. In Barcelona city, every year there are 150 people that are dead, and nobody knows till somebody goes inside the flat or the house and finds somebody dead. Okay, that is society like this. And our studies is 25,000 people could be victims of that, dying alone because no family, no friends, no contact. And they launched a not us, that is not us, the City Hall launched a project, Vincles, links in English, and it's a tablet. With all these people, 25,000 people, they have this risk to die alone, to create the community around them, with the bakery, the supermarket, the bar, the coiffeur, the hairdresser, this kind of around, no? And they can communicate through the video with the tablet, no? Could be a neighbor on the street or the house. Could be the family far away. Sometimes you have to work outside and your dad is there alone, no? And the idea is to have a communication, and now is to put some health things, issues, no? To communicate to the doctor, the GP, because there are people generally, they have difficulty to move or to have mobility, and they can contact the doctor, no? And that is a very good idea, and is financed by American Foundation. What's the name after Giuliani, the second mayor?
Oh, it's the Bloomberg.
Bloomberg Foundation is financing that because it was a kind of prize. But it's a way to see things happen, and that means they're doing things really amazing. And in the human side of the things, no? I think it's not health, but could be health too.
Okay, so we have to wrap this up. First of all, thank you for sharing all the knowledge. I hope it was more relaxed. They have more speeches, so you can go and listen to them. Thank you to the audience for being with us. And this concludes our innovation session. And again, we'll repeat, do come at the Knopolis to see the startups. They need our support and our knowledge, and you can give them feedback. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.